Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Coastal Fellowship. As Unitarian Universalists, we are people of all ages, races, national origins, abilities, classes, sexual orientations, and gender identities. We believe that all people have inherent worth and dignity and work toward a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Today is Racial Justice Sunday, which we observe the weekend of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday as we celebrate his work toward racial equality and look toward what still needs to be accomplished toward a world where all can thrive. I am the interim minister here, the Reverend Micah C. Ma, and my pronouns are they, them, and theirs. With me today are Penny Hooper from the Racial Justice team, accompanist Megan Smith, and looks like we have Dan and Karen on tech today. Thank you so much to Dan and Karen making things happen for the folks in Zoom land, and we always offer a special welcome to Zoom. Camera's back there, give them a wave. Hi, Zoom land. Now, do we have any first-time visitors in the sanctuary today? Please raise your hand if this is your first time here. All right. And now, would you like to introduce yourself? Raise your hand if you would like to introduce yourself. You will need to wait for us to bring the microphone to you. Okay, one person would like to introduce themselves. All right. You do need to speak into the mic because they can't hear you unless you're amplified.
Would you like me to stand up?
If you want. It's up to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Wakeen. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm from the Bay Area in Richmond, East Bay, California, and it's a pleasure to be here to visit my longtime friend, Reverend Micah.
Yeah. All right. Is there anyone else that'd like to introduce themselves? It's okay if you don't. I know that maybe you didn't plan public speaking when you woke up today. All right, and now I invite wearer of many hats, board co-secretary and search committee member Miriam Green to read some announcements for us. I mean, she's also, chair of buildings and grounds. What else do? You're on the pastoral care team, kitchen cadet, choir.
Good morning. Whoa. Is that all right, Karen? Thoughtful gatherings are back. These are small groups that meet in each other's homes or at the church or on Zoom or whatever works for them to discuss spiritual topics and get to know one another better. Look for the sign-up sheet in our email newsletter, The Wave, or our monthly newsletter, Our Coastline. We look forward to getting to know one another better, especially new members and visitors. Did you get that? Especially new members and visitors. Next Sunday, January 21st, we're having a flag raising here at UCF. Woo, 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 woo. We will be raising the American flag, the Progress flag, and for now, the third flag will be the North Carolina flag, though that may change. Stay after the service for a short ceremony, followed by cake. And finally, we've known from the beginning of Reverend Ma's time with us that they are our interim minister. They even have their walking stick up here as a reminder that their time here is limited. So we are in the process of searching for our next full-time, contract minister. Who did that? Okay. Okay. Oh, the walking stick. Oh, show off. Okay. Please plan to stay after the service on January 28th to hear an update and ask questions and provide feedback on the search for our new full-time contract minister. Also, there is a link to UCF's congregational profile in this week's Wave and a hard copy on the bulletin board in the social hall. Will the search committee members who are here raise their hands, please? There's Amy. Penny? She sneaked out. Okay. Oh, she's... Thank you, Penny. These are the these are the folks to ask if you have any questions, and thank them for their hard work. And now we invite all those in the sanctuary to silence their cell phones, and all on Zoom to please turn off their cameras to conserve bandwidth. Now, please turn and greet one another. Thank you. I think I got it.
That was excellent work. Today's opening words are a responsive reading from our gray hymnal by Tony Vincent. It is called For Martin Luther King Jr. I didn't write down the number, but the words are on the slides. O great spirit of light and darkness, open our hearts to the anguish of our pain, to the tired taste of swallowed tears, and to our unrealized vision. In this place we bring our scattered lives together, growing in meaning and looking for truth. Be with us as we continue our search for understanding of the mystery of the temporal. Move with us as we unravel the implied imperatives of hopes unfulfilled. As we touch one another in common cause and with the Great Spirit in our midst, come, let us worship together. I invite Penny Hooper up to read our chalice lighting words, the symbol of our shared faith.
Today's chalice lighting is by Anastasia Baroche. As we light this flame of hope, may our congregation become a kaleidoscope of souls and people, an abstract flame-like pattern in bright gold colors and a black background. In the presence of this flame, in me, in you, in us. This is an invitation to sit at the table. May we tend our soul fire through these challenging and trying times to open the hearts and minds of all who enter our doors. As we light also our peace candle to remind ourselves that peace is a process that requires work, that peace is not merely an absence of conflict, but the presence of justice.
I invite everyone to rise as you're willing and able for our opening hymn, number 113, Where is Our Holy Church? I now would like to invite the members of the Board of Trustees up to the chancel for a moment of sadness and also of gratitude. Yes, Mark, you too. Vice President of the Board, Tom Wentworth, as we know, has been away for many months tending to his health, and he has decided officially to resign from the board in order to focus on his recovery. We know that this is the right decision for Tom, and we maintain hope that we will see him and his wife Linda back with us one of these days, if only for a visit. Mark Hooper has agreed to fill Tom's position on the board as vice president and also to stay on as president once that term is fulfilled. We are incredibly grateful to Mark. He has been a board member and board president before, not to mention a long time member of the Unitarian Coastal Fellowship who has seen ministers come and go. All right. Hold your applause, guys. There will be time for that. So first, I ask the board to please read the words in front of them. Maybe, Susan, can you say them into the microphone so everyone can hear?
We, the Unitarian Coastal Fellowship, gladly receive you on the Board of Trustees to care for the vision and the mission to conduct the business and administration of this fellowship.
Right. And the congregation also has some words. And finally, Mark has some words.
I, your Vice President, and soon to be President of this congregation, faithfully covenant to conduct the business and administration of this fellowship. I offer you my speaking and my listening, my leadership, my service, my respect, and my caring for all the interests of all of us.
Right. Next slide, please. There we go. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Welcome to the board. And now, every week, we make some space and time to celebrate our joys together and also grieve our sorrows together. Often these things are woven together, such as our sadness at Tom and Linda's continued health concerns and our joy that Mark has stepped up to leadership. Part of life, part of being human, part of learning to be human is simply remembering that we are human and that to be human is to go through ups and downs, together and also alone. In a moment, when Megan plays for us some beautiful music, I invite everyone who's willing and able to line up against the far wall over there by the triptych painting and come around to the front to where we have a beautiful basket of shells and stones and sea glass and coral, and I think most recently some acorns from our little baby live oak outside. You can take as many or as few as you like to represent whatever is on your heart and leave them in the glass chalice of water. If you have any personal joys or concerns that you would like me to read aloud to the congregation, you can fill out one of those little slips of paper there and leave them in the basket, and I will read them aloud for the congregation after I have shared our community joys and concerns. This acorn, this symbol of life, is for the 100 days of war in Gaza. May there not be 100 more. May life follow the destruction. Closer to home, our intrepid member Sandra Shelp broke her ankle this weekend. We are grateful that it is not keeping her down. She is adjusting to life on crutches, and she can certainly use all of our help now with all of the cleaning tasks that she handles around the church. You may be surprised what all she does. So if you see a mess or a dishwasher that needs loading or unloading, please do it for Sandra. Karen's sister, Nancy Baggett, is home after a successful procedure under the care of her partner and the watchful long-distance eyes of her sisters. Thank you to everyone for their concern and good wishes. This one is a joy and a concern. Joellen's daughter Elizabeth is transferring from D.C. to be Peace Corps director in Samoa for 2 years. That is very far away. Pat White has moved to hospice care at Bayview in New Bern. We're very sorry to hear that, Ron. And Rowan shares that a new niece was born on Thursday. Her name is Kaylee Elizabeth. Will all please join me in the spirit of prayer? For this moment, let us attend to our breath, how it moves in and out. It moves in and out like the tides that wash up on the shore. In and out. All things proceed in a cycle. The sun, the moon, the seasons, the currents, the tides, the migration of birds. There is a phrase that can humble kings and lift up the suffering. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. That is a phrase that cuts joys short and sorrows too. This reminder that all things will pass in time, that all things move through a cycle. And so, as we attend to the cycle of our breath, let us pray for the wisdom and the courage to remember that this too shall pass, and that joy and sorrow are always woven finely, that every day there is a funeral, and every day there is a birthday, that every day there is a wedding, every day there is a birth. Amen, and blessed be. I invite everyone now to join in singing the blessing song. This song is how we sing out our little ones to the other building. It's a blessing you were born, and it matters what you do, what you know about God is a piece of the truth. Let the beauty you love be what we do, and you don't have to do it alone. It's a blessing I was born, and it matters what I do. What I know about God is a piece of the truth. Let the beauty I love be what I do, and I don't have to do it alone. It's a blessing we were born, and it matters what we do. What we know about God is a piece of the truth. Let the beauty we love be what we do, and we don't have to do it alone. I invite everyone now into a moment of quiet reflection and contemplation.
Good morning. I'm Penny Hooper, and I'm doing the reflection today. When Reverend Ma asked me to do this reflection, she said, try to remember when you first realized you were white. Can you remember? I can't remember. I said to her, I really don't know when it was. It seems like I've always known I was white, and that most everybody around me looked just like me. The schools I attended in Indiana were mostly white until I got to high school. My neighborhood, my friends, the TV shows, the commercials, the movies I watched, they all reflected the white culture that I was born and raised in. That white supremacy culture wasn't the terminology that we used then. If you said white supremacist, you meant somebody who was wearing a white hood and a Ku Klux Klan member, right? That's not the way it is now. I'm sure my parents thought they raised me without prejudices against people of color, but they were not active anti-racists either. I graduated from high school in 1966, which was the time of the Civil Rights Movement and a great time for liberals. They had people like Martin Luther King raising awareness about injustices, and with John Lewis making good trouble. I assimilated what was going on around me during the 60s, and to this day, I still think of myself as an old hippie. I'm sure I'm not alone in this congregation with that thought. Make love, not war was our slogan. And I still think that's a pretty good slogan, make love, not war. I marched for peace while in college, and at Purdue University, I remember attending a sit-in at the president's office, but for all my life, I don't know what we were sitting in about. We were just there. That was a long time ago. But life goes on, and I went on to study biology and to understand and recognize the environmental degradation issues that are threatening our planet. My activism turned to education at the local community college and demonstrations about climate change, about environmental issues. I thought I understood, and I taught about the interconnected web of which we are all a part. You recognize that, I'm sure, as our seventh principle. I understood it from a biological point of view, but I still needed to take this one step further. I read a book which opened my eyes. It was written by Naomi Klein, and the title is quite prophetic. This changes everything. It's taken me for a long time to reach this point in my life where I'm finally understanding the interconnected web of nature with our society and our culture. This is what I know as systemic racism. The Cambridge Dictionary defines systemic racism as, and I'll read from quote, policies and practices that exist throughout a whole society or organization and that result in and support a continued unfair advantage to some people and unfair or harmful treatment of others based on race. In America, white people are in power, and greed is our creed. Environmental racism is only the tip of the iceberg of the systemic racism we have in America today. Understanding the intersectionality is crucial for our anti-racism work and our environmental work. I am grateful for my faith and for this community, which continues to guide me on this journey. We formed the UCF Anti-Racism Book Club a few years back. Many of you were part of that, and read about 20 books over that period on this topic to educate ourselves about systemic racism. All these books are in our own library in the Sally White Center, and if anyone is interested, you can check them out. During COVID, I took a UUA class on Zoom. It was called Beloved Conversations, which asked me to write about what I have learned. So in my journal, I found this quote in preparation for my reflection today. I said, like most white people, I have lived my life with no authentic relationships with Black people or people of color until I came to this work. To understand why that is so and to change that will free me and enrich me. So that is my spiritual journey, dear friends. For me, it begins with that key phrase, authentic relationships. I have so much more to unlearn and to unpack from the existing white supremacist culture which teaches white is better. I was raised in that culture, and it still surrounds me and all of us daily in America. For me, it is time to leave it behind and to move to a multicultural society. I believe another world is possible. I believe we can build a beloved community. For myself, it will begin with the foundation built on authentic relationships. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Penny. You know, I simply have no idea what it's like to be a white person growing up in a white neighborhood. So before I talk any more about white culture and what that means, I do want to acknowledge that this is a hard topic for a lot of people to listen to, and that it can bring up a lot of hard feelings. And so I invite you to notice that if you're feeling some kind of way while I'm talking for the next, 15 minutes or so, if you start feeling defensive or angry or guilty, I invite you to notice that feeling, let it pass through you, this too shall pass, and see that if you can continue listening in order to maybe learn something. And, if you need to come up after the service and, tell me about what you were thinking or feeling afterwards, that's fine. But please do keep listening. So, and just to be clear, I'm not planning on scolding anybody. I don't think that's helpful or productive. And I'm a Unitarian Universalist. I don't believe that any of us are bad people. Okay? I believe that we are all sacred beings and that at the end of the day, we are all trying our best. So what I'm setting out to do with this talk, at least initially, is just to define some terms and then talk about what this has to do with spirituality. What does race have to do with our sense of self? And why are we talking about this in a religious environment? These are spiritual questions. So first off, I'm going to talk white culture. When activists and academics talk about white culture, they are referring to, for the most part, middle-class, white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant American culture. So if you grew up down east, if you grew up in Appalachia, in a holler, if you grew up in Ukraine, the elements of white culture that I'm about to talk about may not apply to you because you did not grow up middle-class, white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, WASP. So as some of you know, I grew up in Southern California in an ethnic enclave. We spoke Chinese at home. I went to Chinese school on Saturdays and absolutely hated it. We shopped at Asian grocery stores, and all of my teachers were white. The mayor and the city council of my hometown were white. White people were the main characters of all the books that I read, Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, all the TV shows that I watched. I went to school, read my history book, learned about all these white historical figures, all these white presidents. At the time, there had not yet been a black president. And all of these white teachers, all of these white leaders, and all of these white TV shows and books modeled, quote-unquote, correct behavior in the world. It modeled a way of talking, a way of eating, a way that families should look like. And so I learned as a child that to be white and to act like the white people in my TV shows and movies was to be normal, and to be anything else was to be fringe, to be on the margins. As Black author Toni Morrison put it, in this country, American means white. Everybody else has to use a hyphen. In my case, it means that I, at my big age of, I actually don't remember how old I was. I was probably 8 or something. But at my big age of 8 years old, I once criticized my own family by calling them funny foreign people. They thought it was very funny, and they still love to bring that up every now and then. Remember that time you called us funny foreign people? And I'm like, God, that was 30-some years ago. They still bring it up. But let's have a moment of realness. Be honest with yourself right in the moment. If I ask you to picture an American, an American person, what do you picture? Okay? When I ask you to picture American food, what do you picture? Here's a very simple example. Band-Aids. You cut yourself, whatever. You buy a Band-Aid, from the store, have them in your medicine cabinet. There is a default Band-Aid color. And it's not defaulting to darker skin tones, right? It works pretty well for me. I'm pretty light-skinned, works well for a lot of the people in this room, does not work well for people with darker skin tones. There's also a default hair type, you know? Some people can walk into pretty much any hair salon and expect to find someone who can cut their hair. But if you have, you know, what they call a more nappy hair texture, you can't just walk into like Supercuts or whatever and expect to find someone who can deal with your hair. You might luck out, you know, at Supercuts, but you're not going to assume it, right? So this is what I mean when I talk about whiteness being the norm, or when Penny talks about white supremacy culture. See, whiteness has a culture. It's just like any other culture. Black culture, Asian culture, Latino culture, what have you. There are certain rules and norms in these different spaces. So there are certain rules and norms in white spaces, just like there are certain rules and norms in black spaces, or Native American spaces, or nerd spaces, or women's spaces, or queer spaces. Different cultures have different standards when it comes to how decisions are made, what clothes you wear, who gets to speak when, what's considered good art or good music. You know, in some cultures, it's considered completely appropriate to be late to things all the time. You know, that's just normal. In other cultures, punctuality is the respect you show for other people by being on time. You know, depends on who you talk to. But in the United States, white culture is the default culture. It's the culture that goes without saying. If there's an ethnic foods aisle in the supermarket, whose food is in it? Right? Whose food is just considered food, and whose food is considered ethnic? Fun fact, in England, pasta is in the ethnic foods aisle, because they consider pasta to be ethnic food, apparently. So unless there's a descriptor in front of it, it is by and for white people. Food is just food, right? Unless it's Chinese food or Mexican food or Nigerian food. Church is just church, unless it's black church or Taiwanese church. A man is just a man, unless he's a black man or a Korean man. If we don't describe somebody's race, we assume that he's white, because that's the default. And it is, in fact, actually why I describe people as white. I tell people, oh, my board president, sorry to pick on you, Susan, you know, is a white woman. You know, that may or may not be relevant to the story, but I point it out just because other people say, like, oh, I have a friend who's black. It's like, yes, I have many friends who are white, just so you know. Now, there is a spiritual cost to whiteness being the norm. And it is a cost for all people, regardless of color. So the cost for people of color is that when whiteness is the norm, you learn, as I did as a child, that your way of being is not the quote-unquote correct way of being. And when I was a kid, being correct, being normal, was very important to me. I think that's the case for a lot of children. You're very concerned about being normal, fitting in, right? So hence, my family being funny foreign people, because they spoke English with accents and did not like eating hamburgers. They didn't like bread in general. They're rice people, you know. Bagels are like a horror to them. It's like the most bready bread. Anyway, but as I got older, I also realized that being quote-unquote correct or normal is also about access to power. The more I can be like the people in power, the more access to power I can have. So for instance, I think, say, a lot of women who have risen to high positions in the corporate world have learned that in order to do so, they have to some degree, perform masculinity. They have to be able to take up space in a room like men do, speak up in meetings like men do, even if it means interrupting other people, dress like men do, right? The famous pantsuits. Another example is people who have crossed class divides, say people who grew up poor or working class and now find themselves in an environment where they are surrounded by people from a different class, like say if they find themselves now working in academia as a professor. They find that they have to act like they know how to act middle or high class. They have to know the difference between business casual, and casual dress. They have to know how to eat at nice restaurants, your napkin goes in your lap. They have to know how to behave when you're a guest in somebody's home. And if they don't act that way, then they're weird. And if they're weird, then they're ostracized. And if they're ostracized, that means they don't get promoted, among other things. So to do all of this, to emulate the people in power, you have to leave part of yourself behind, whether that means acting more white, acting more like a man, acting more upper class, whatever. And if you were unwilling or unable to leave that part behind, unwilling because maybe you just don't want to, or unable because, this is how I was raised, I don't know how I'm supposed to act, then, well, you're going to have a hard time in the system, climbing the ladder or what have you, because the system was not created for you or the way you act or the language you speak. The system was created for people who act or speak a certain way, and those people are the default people. And the default people in the United States are white. This is what Penny was talking about when she brought up systemic racism. So that's the cost of white cultural supremacy for people of color, a lot of which you might already know. So then what is the cost of whiteness being the norm for white people? And this is a little tricky for me to talk about because, again, I'm not a white person. So this is drawn mostly out of my conversations and understandings of white friends and reading the literature, etc., because there is a cost. It sounds like a great deal for white people so far. White people are in power. Everything is for us. Yay. Well, here's the thing. Like I said, in order to be white, you have to leave a part of yourself behind. So for a while, I dated a white woman who told me a story about when she was a kid and she was in school and they were learning about different cultures. And in whatever little 5th grade textbook they were using, there were all these pictures of children dressed up in their traditional clothes. So a little Korean child dressed in a hanbok, little Austrian child dressed in lederhosen. You get the idea, right? Maybe some of you had a textbook like this in elementary school. And she looked at those pictures and she did not know which one of them was hers. And in that moment, she felt robbed of cultural identity because she did not know where she came from. Her family had been in the United States for, generations and generations. All she knew was that she was white and that she was American. Many of us here may have learned at some point that Irish and Italian people were once not considered white. Has anyone heard that before? Yeah, a few people. They were eventually accepted into whiteness. We consider them white people now, to the point where it's a little funny if pasta's in the ethnic foods aisle. But it came at a cost. They had to give up being Italian and being Irish in order to be white. They had to give up something special. Many white Americans who have been here for generations, maybe all the way back to the Revolutionary War, have no connection whatsoever to where they came from. They just know that they're white. No wonder so many white Americans often feel drawn to cultures that they perceive as being richer and more colorful. Indian culture, Mexican culture, Japanese culture, black culture. This is, I think, the root of cultural appropriation, which is the act of sort of claiming other people's cultural products and claiming it as your own. That's where it comes from, because white people feel like they don't have a culture. Or alternately, I think some white people feel like their culture is salads that aren't really salads. They involve a lot of mayonnaise or Cool Whip sometimes. This is the spiritual cost of white cultural supremacy. When white culture is supreme, it turns people into normal and abnormal. It robs people of cultural identities in return for access to quote-unquote normal and therefore access to power. It divides people from one another and from themselves. White cultural supremacy teaches white people, teaches everybody that there is a right way to be and a wrong way to be, and if you step out of line, that is it, goodbye. When actually, in reality, is there a wrong way to be, really? And if there is a wrong way to be, who decides? Who decides what is correct behavior and what is wrong behavior? Our first principle states that all people have inherent worth and dignity. And our shared value of pluralism states that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. Both of these things demand that we reject white supremacy culture. We reject a world in which there is only one right way to do things, and that is the way that white Anglo-Saxon Protestants do things. And instead, as Unitarian Universalists, we embrace and strive for a world in which all cultures are celebrated and regarded as equal. A world in which everyone grows up knowing who they are and where they come from, and that they are as sacred as everyone else. A world in which no one ever has to fear being abnormal or less than. A world in which all people are free. Free to be themselves, free to explore and pursue their own happiness, free to engage in authentic relationship with one another with free-flowing cultural exchange, free to love who they love and believe what they believe. Is this not what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said in his famous I Have a Dream speech? He said, "When we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last." May someday freedom ring. Let freedom ring. May it be so. Let it be so. I invite everyone to remain seated for our next hymn, number 1020 in the Teal hymnal, Wo Ya Ya.
It's a tricky little song. The choir practiced it, and we still don't quite have it, I don't think. Let's see. Every month, we share the plate with a different charity or nonprofit organization, meaning half of everything that goes into the offering plate that isn't a pledge is shared with that charity or nonprofit. This month, we're sharing the plate with the NAACP Scholarship Fund. Every year, the NAACP gives out 3 to 4 college scholarships to Carteret County students who meet their criteria of financial need, academic achievement, leadership, and community service. Your donations directly benefit the youth of this county, so please give generously. I invite the greeters forward to collect today's offering.
Please join in blessing this offering with hymn number 402, From You I Receive. We'll sing it twice through. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. Thank you. And now Penny will lead us in our chalice extinguishing words.
Please join me in our chalice extinguishing words. In English, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And Espanol, which is not my language, so pardon me. Extinguimos esta llama, pero no la luz de la verdad, el calor de comunidad, o el fuego de nuestro compromiso. Estos los llevaremos en el corazón hasta que estemos juntos otra vez.
And now invite all to rise as you're able and willing for our closing hymn. This one's a favorite, I think, from the civil rights movement, We Shall Overcome. Friends, it is our practice in this congregation to hold hands for the benediction. So I invite everyone to hold hands. If you are not comfortable holding hands, you can move to the center of the interesting shape that we are making and just make it clear that you don't want to hold hands. Wait, I'm coming too. I want to hold hands. Can I get in here? Oh, thank you. Okay. All right. Is everyone in? Is everyone holding a hand who wants to hold a hand? All right, friends. You know, that last song, We Shall Overcome, is sung all over the world. I've seen it sung in Palestine. I'm sure it's sung in other places. And so let that remind us that people all over the world are united in this struggle for freedom. The freedom to live how we want to live, to be who we are, to have, as Penny put it, authentic relationships with ourselves and one another. Let us be part of that struggle as well. Go in peace. I'm grateful for all of you. Amen.